Welcome to Digging into the Future. I've got Tito Costa here from Elea Data Centers out of Brazil. He's actually our first Latin American data center operator that we've had on the show. So Tito, welcome.
By all means. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Looking forward to what you have over there for me.
Well, listen, so just tell us, because a lot of our viewers are not that familiar with Latin America and obviously Brazil. And I think, you actually just kind of gave me some really good color right before this discussion about how large Brazil is and actually São Paulo is in the entire, in terms of all of Latin America, in terms of GNP. But tell us about Elea. What are you doing? How did it start? What's been your journey so far as a company?
Yeah, so I've been with the industry for more or less like 10 years before Elea actually jumped into me and called me out of Equinix. I used to work with Equinix throughout the majority of my time in the industry and in multiple positions. And Alessandro Lombardi, who is the founder of Elea, was looking for a chief revenue officer to look into this platform of data centers that he had acquired from a telecommunication chapter 11 that was going on in Brazil back then, from Oi telecommunication company. And he ended up buying 5 data centers. Later on, a couple other acquisitions were made that made us growing from 5 data centers upwards of 9 data centers that we have now. So when Alessandro invited me to the platform, one of the goals that he had was to support the digitalization of the country. The majority of the data center industry in Brazil still sits in São Paulo. If you look into the country or the data center white space in the country, almost 80% of the market share within Brazil comes from the São Paulo metro.
Okay, and so it's also just for our users that don't know, like is São Paulo also the hub for? I mean, do people host stuff for Argentina and the other Latin American markets in São Paulo, or is it really just focused on Brazil? I mean, is it?
There is, if you look into international customers,
yeah,
a lot of them come back to you and say, well, I have Brazil figured out. And when you double click on that and say, how is that? I have a deployment in São Paulo. Chances are you don't have Brazil figured out. Brazil is a pretty big country. And some companies can even go even further and say, well, I have Latin America figured out. I have a deployment in São Paulo. No, you do not. There is a lot of differences, cultural differences within those countries. Yes, you can serve a lot of the content out of São Paulo into those other countries, into Argentina, into Chile or Colombia. But I mean, more and more the market have grown throughout this period of time, the past 10 years, and you can find data center operators either in Colombia or Chile or Argentina nowadays. Economy, of course, in Argentina also improved a little bit with the new government going on over there, that also positioned them into a more, capturing a little bit more of the international customers into that space a little bit as well. So I still feel like São Paulo is a good first spot to land.
Yep.
If you don't operate in the region, in the continent, but that will be just your first step. Chances are you'll have to take another couple one.
Like it seems like with a lot of the emerging markets, the challenge is also getting the power, right? Which is is that abundant in Brazil, or is it you're just kind of butting up always against the top end of the? Because it seems like not just Brazil, but as we sort of go around the world, unless you're in the Nordics or some of these other places, or in the Middle East where you've got a lot of power. Most of the other places are just they build enough power to deal with it, and then you start adding data centers. It starts to all of a sudden, really push the grid, right? And how does it look in Brazil?
Not only that, just going back a little bit, it's not just power, but water as well.
Yeah.
If you think about the future of data centers and how you deal with that, that's also another aspect that you should think about. And we had examples in the continent, in Chile more specifically, where a customer was building a data center and they actually end up losing their license to build the data center because of the amount of water that is going to be pulled into the facility to cool everything that needed to be cooled over there. But coming back to the power issue, I always split that problem in two. One is the generating capacity, generating power is one of the problems, but the other one is the capillarization. I mean, how you transfer that power from the gen sites into the data center itself, which is the grid itself, right? So both problems occur in different shapes and forms throughout the world. What I would say is that in terms of generation, Brazil is very well positioned, and almost I would say Latin America. There is abundance of power throughout those countries. You might argue that not all that power is clean. Yes, depending on the country. Rough numbers again, Brazil has roughly 90% of its power coming from renewable sources. That's very, very high. When
you say renewable, is that including like nuclear, or is that just?
That includes nuclear, but we only have one nuclear power plant in Brazil, so that's not a big chunk of the number.
Yeah, so it's like hydro, it's wind, it's
a lot of wind, a lot of solar. Brazil puts online roughly 4 gigawatts of power every year, and from those 4 gigawatts of power, 95% of that comes from renewable sources, either solar or wind. So that shows that Brazil is in a movement to even increase the percentage of renewable sources into its mix. If you compare that with, say, Mexico, Argentina, or Chile, that's around 30-ish% renewables. But who is counting? That's always a question that some of those customers, they come back to us and say, well, it depends. Depends if I'm on to put a data center in Ireland, chances are that renewable power would be something that I'm very keen into discussing. But if that's not a debate in that particular country, I might not look into that as a necessity to deploy over there. But Brazil has another aspect of it that I feel like it's sets it apart as well in terms of the grid. In Brazil, whenever you want to connect into the grid for high voltage power lines, the standard power grid that you have access to is 138 kV lines. You have to go through a process to connect in what we call the basic network to have access to the 500 kilovolt lines, right? With that comes the 2 gigawatt type of sites that Brazil might be able to deploy. And that process takes a little while, but there is ways of expediting that in a way that you as a consumer, the data center operator, for example, you are able to build that grid and then give that for free for the government afterwards. So that expedite a lot the ability of the data center operators or even the hyperscalers, if they're building them themselves, to have access to the 2 gigawatts of power in one particular site. If you are not going towards that direction, chances are you will not be able to do 500 megawatt site. You would be stuck with 100 megawatts, whatever.
So it sounds like you have to really, you are sort of at where a lot of these data center companies are heading, which is that not only do they have to, there was a lot of data centers that used to just be able to plug into the grid, and what you have to actually is think 2 steps ahead, right? Which is how do I actually get to a place where I can get high-powered lines that I actually can do this, so I can get to the, it's very, it's interesting because I think as we start thinking about AI, we're all going to be going to that. I mean, the world is going to be looking at, how do I get a gigawatt of power and transport it, right? Which is, it sounds like you guys are doing it now, right? Or it's just, you're having to have that thought process, right?
Absolutely, I was talking with another friend in the industry a couple of months ago in one of the conferences that I attended, and then he's already well developed. He has a lot of customers, a lot of power already in place. But we were discussing exactly that. I mean, the amount of due diligence that happens these days for me to actually close a deal, it's, monumental compared to what happened 10 years ago when I first joined the industry. They were like, yeah, you want a 1 megawatt contract? Yeah, sure, go ahead, here you go. I mean, they never visited the site. They don't want to know where the money is coming from, whatever. You'll figure that out. I'm fine with you, I trust in you and whatever. But nowadays, they're like, I want to see letters of intent. I want to see banks. I want to see power commitments. I want to see this and that. And it's a lot of work. And the simple aspect of being able to sit down with those customers and making sure that they are not buying a PowerPoint data center, which sometimes may occur, it's also part of my job now to make sure that he's buying something that can actually be delivered, and having to go against other companies that are not that didn't do their due diligence correctly and are not presenting with everything that has to happen for a data center project to be completed.
Yeah, no, it is complicated, and I think it's raising the bar on just employees too, and talent. Actually having to be able to. It's no longer just going and selling space as a commodity, right? It's becoming a very technical and sort of almost a supply chain strategy that you have to have in place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched a little bit on employees right now, and that's another problem that we'll probably be facing in the industry in a couple more years. Rough numbers say that nearly 20% of our workforce in our industry will be retiring soon, and we are not putting new people into the industry anymore. I went to PTC DC, another of your ideas for PTC, and I remember one gentleman saying that the problem is not the money. The problem is finding the people to actually deploy that capital and make sure that will be developed and those data centers, those projects will be delivered. So if you look into that educational aspect of it as well, there is also another challenge over there that we'll have to surpass and make sure that we as data center operators are covering for our customers as well.
Obviously, you deal with all the big U.S. hyperscalers, and you have a unique perspective because you can see them sort of coming into a market, and you're kind of like the one or a few filters that actually probably sees them all coming into Brazil, right? What do you see? Are they bullish? Do you think that they're expanding very quickly? What's your feel? I'm trying to get a bellwether where we are in terms of where these guys our heads are at this point.
I mean, there is a lot of projects going on in our market right now, in Latin America as a whole, but more specifically in Brazil. I feel like the majority of the discussions goes around Brazil. I mean, people are looking into deploying training modules. I mean, artificial intelligence pods, training pods. They're looking more into Brazil than anywhere else. And they are still looking. They are yet to pull the trigger into the market. But there are a lot of conversations going on with them. And the decision, it depends on a multitude of factors, right? There are geopolitical aspects that we have been exchanging a couple of emails about. There is import taxes because that's also a thing that goes with those companies. Again, rough numbers, as you know, 10 million per megawatt is usually the standard in the industry. But that's only infrastructure. It's at least 5x that if you are deploying hardware into the data center, right? So it's a lot of money that is being deployed and bringing into the country that generate a lot of access for the country, and of course that puts a burden in the discussion as well. So whenever the BPs are being put together, those are aspects that need to be considered. But we are not as close as the US in terms of the bullish momentum that still happens in the US and people trying to find and put their hands in power here and there, or trying to figure out how to connect directly into nuclear powered data centers, whatever. That it still didn't happen in Brazil. Although I feel like in the continent as a whole, we are very well prepared to absorb whatever demand that might exist. And again, if you look into the size of the markets, just look into the size of Brazil, 400 megawatt, give or take, of power. We are very small compared to a normal AI type of deployment. Nobody talks about an AI deployment that is smaller than 100 megawatts these days, right? So that's if only one customer deploys one of those pods in Brazil, that's already 25% of the market right off the bat with one deployment, right? So we are seeing a lot of conversation going on. There is still work to be done in terms of discussing importation taxes. There are ways, I mean, the Brazilian government positioned it into a way that there are ways to go around, not illegally, by all means, totally legally. There are ways to go around import taxes into the country. So that was a big burden that we left behind last year. Companies are beginning to see how to work towards that. Power is there. The grid is there. We have ways to expedite the grid in the country. So I feel like we are very ready to absorb some of that capacity that is going on in the US mainly.
Yeah, and I think So, but I guess some of it comes down to geopolitics too, right? I mean, it's
A little bit,
I think I shared with you that there's a recent study that just came out, I think, a week ago that said, listed the countries that the Americans will allow Nvidia to basically export to, right? And I think Brazil was on the tier 2, not tier 1, which is tier 1 seems like,
you can do whatever.
The faucet is open. Tier 2 is like, oh, maybe, and tier 3 is like never. You know, like it's and so it's interesting. So it sounds like not only you the challenges of building data centers in the grid, now you've got the third element, which is you got to go see your friends in the government to get them to sort of sign up and get friendly with the Americans to get the kid in there, right? Is that?
It is amazing. When I took the job as a chief revenue officer, I never thought that I would have to have a federal or government relations within my organization. Yeah. Now I have a government relations director sitting under me that's basically traveling to Brasilia every now and again, talking to senators, talking to the lower house, making sure that all the policies are going towards the direction that we feel like is most aligned to what the industry is. But yeah, it's another aspect of it that we now have to think about that I never thought I would have to think about as a chief revenue officer.
Yeah, no, it's got to be. It's a little painful, I think, at times, right?
Sometimes it is. Yeah. It is because and I understand why it is, because that lawmaker that's over there has to legislate not only for data center operators. He have to legislate for all the industries. He has to understand what's going on in the agriculture or livestock or diseases or pharmaceuticals, whatever. So he have to legislate around a lot of stuff. So it's hard for them sometimes, and sometimes we ourselves have to take a step back and say, hey, perhaps there is a little bit of education that we need to do with our legislators to make sure that everything goes around and towards a direction that makes more sense. Case in point is what Oracle just did when they announced that article that I sent to you, criticizing a little bit on their view of the limitations towards shipping GPUs abroad.
Yep.
Right. So that's an example of a little bit of education that we as an industry sometimes need to do with our legislators as well.
Yeah. No, I think we're in a hard place because I don't think yet people know what AI is capable of doing, and people are worried that
Gil, let's be honest. We don't know what AI might be able to do, right?
Yeah, no, we don't. And it's so people. I think when people are scared, that's where they tend to be much more conservative, and then they tend to limit things, and probably, well, who knows? Maybe it was the right. It's hard to hindsight will be the only way that we'll know. We'll look back in 10 years and say, oh, maybe we should have done it differently. But who knows? It's
my personal opinion is that there needs to be some sort of regulation. I just don't know if this is the moment to do it, because we might jeopardize what that technology might do for us as a society if we go around it right now.
Yeah.
So I almost feel like we need to open it a little bit, let it flow a little bit, and figure out what comes out of it before taking a decision on closing a lot of the possibilities that this technology might deliver for us.
How's the next couple of years look? I mean, I know you've been growing like gangbusters down in Brazil, right? And what do you see? What does it look like for the market for the next 24 months?
Yeah, so for the past 3 years, we have been making acquisitions after acquisition. I mean, we acquired at least one data center, one company every year for the past 3 years. Looking ahead now, we feel like we have a good size of platform, so 20 megawatts operational, upwards of 40 megawatts available by December of this year, with all the acquisition that we just recently made. So we acquired transformers already, are being manufactured, should be delivered by September this year. Liquid cooled equipment, so we already buy everything from Vertiv. So we are preparing a liquid cooled data center for AI in Brazil.
Oh, wow.
So we are taking the steps ahead of time to make sure that when a customer appears, presents itself and say, well, Brazil is a good option, we are there. Right?
Yep.
So that's definitely something that we see this year, a big artificial intelligence deployment happening in the country. But not only that, because of our geographically dispersed platform, a lot of the international customers come to us asking for that second step for Brazil. I have São Paulo figured out. Give me another next step. And we are there because we have a platform that you can grow south of Brazil, and by south you can always deploy in Porto Alegre, for example, and expand that 10 millisecond radius of latency all the way into the north of Argentina or Uruguay and Paraguay. So from one single deployment you can cover a lot and stay in the same country. You can also go into Brasilia, which is up north of the country, center region of the country, and you can do a lot of federal stuff because that's the Brazilian capital, that's our DC. A lot of government branches are sitting there. They are keen to use more of cloud. They're keen to understand artificial intelligence, but they are sitting almost 30 milliseconds away from São Paulo. And that puts a huge burden in terms of the amount of use cases that you can have for those customers. So coming on the short term, again, 30 megawatts of upwards to 40 megawatts of new capacity coming live by the end of this year. And of course, when we just made a recent acquisition, we did the closing actually December 15th was the second closing that we did for DXC. We bought 2 data centers of DXC, old HP enterprises in Brazil.
Yep.
They used to have 2 data centers there. We bought them, both of them. And with that came a lot of capacity already coming into the land. So we have 150 megawatts of capacity already there on those plots of land that we can develop. And also, we just recently bought another plot of land north of our current data center, attached same neighborhood plot of land from our current facility in Rio de Janeiro that can also put another 150 megawatts over there. Oh, wow. So 300 megawatts that probably could be developed as fast as our customers are willing to come.
Yeah.
Again, I'm taking all the steps towards making sure that this is an easy decision for the hyperscalers. Whenever they are willing to take the step towards the country, we are there to host them.
Well, we've had Tito Costa here and on digging into the future, and thank you, Tito, for joining us. It's been a fantastic opportunity to catch up on learning about Brazil. I learned a lot today, so
thank you
for giving us the background, and hopefully this won't be the last time on our show, but thank you, Tito, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.